Welcome to Anthology. In today's training video, we'll be talking about vendor records a little bit. And by vendor, we'll use that term interchangeably, but by vendor, we do mean publishers, distributors, and manufacturers as well. So if you go into your Anthology program and go to Master Files Vendors, you'll see a list of whatever vendors you might already have in your system. And if you want to create a new one, it's F for New. You'll see there's a button at the bottom to do that. And put in your new vendor name. And whatever name you give, when you move out of the name field, either hit enter or tab or save, it is going to need a short code. We use those short code values when there's simply an area such as a little display grid where there may not be enough landscape to show the full name. We'll put the short code in for you. You might want to modify your short code to make a little more sense to you, but as long as it's unique, you can make it what you want, and then we'll F10 to save. Master Files Vendors is also where you would go in to fill in any address information you might have. Maybe you have your ordering rep's email address. You can store that in here as well. You would also go into the discounts area to fill in your vendor discounts. And to do that, it's just a quick right click. I'll say new line. Maybe if I buy $100 worth or more, they will give me 40%. Sometimes you can put this in if their schedules are simple enough. Some vendors have a little more complicated schedule where it's certain days of the week for certain sections for even certain media types they may do. But you can always add a higher tier by putting in the next dollar amount. Maybe at $200, they'll give me 41%. So just as you're adding the new line in, put in the dollar amount, or it may be quantity based. Put in the base amount and the discount they'll give you on top of that, and enter each line as you're creating them. Once you're done with those changes, make sure you F10 save. In other videos, we'll talk about the electronic ordering setup that is a little more detailed. You will want to have started to contact your vendors and tell them that you want to set up your electronic ordering and that you need your account credentials. That should get them the good information to get your account stuff going, and usually they will email you back those credentials. There are other white papers already on the customer zone, and if you do get stuck, just email support@anthology.com and we can give you some help on the electronic ordering setup. So that's how we created just a couple of quick vendors, and you can see I've got a few other vendors in my system. You can always go through and edit a vendor name. Maybe this version of HarperCollins I have should really be maybe HarperCollins Juvenile or Adolescent, let's say. Okay, well, let's just do teen. And there again, notice that vendor shortcode, I can modify that, but that one for me is okay. I'll F10 to save it. So now I've modified everything that was also assigned to that flavor of event or HarperCollins. If I want to maybe move some things together, maybe things got split into the wrong vendors and it shouldn't have, I can always go to the on hand on order, this OHOO tab. I can always go to this tab and look at what are the items that were assigned to this version of HarperCollins. And I have several HarperCollins, so I have items scattered all over, but I can easily fix that just by doing a mass highlight, by doing a shift left click on the first item so it turns dark blue. Another shift left click on the last item in the group. If I want to deselect a title, I would do control click. And those are very common Windows key control commands. You can use that mass highlight technique in quite a few other areas of Anthology. But once I've highlighted this group of records, I can right click and say reassign. And I will pick the proper version of Harper that I wanted this to be under. So let's just say that we will put it under the teen group. And now I'll do F12 select. And yes, I want to change those. Now that those titles are missing from that on hand on order tab, meaning there are no other records assigned to this particular flavor, then I can safely F9 delete that vendor as well. The other time that you run into vendors is a couple different areas. There is, under the Tools menu, the Import External Data. When you import a file either from Edelweiss, or Books in Print, or TitleSource 360, or Ingram iPage, or probably a few others, we will show you what the resource that you pulled from, we will show you what they said the publisher was. We will also show you what they said the media was, the binding, and the subject or section. We want to show you what they call it because we find most stores do not go by the same name. Everybody has their favorite. So you'll notice that you'll see the ref pub or reference for the ref pub, ref binding, ref subject. You'll see those values hopefully in your import file, and then you can go over to the inventory records, the records that you're working on, and say that no, for this item, even though they said it was the HarperCollins, that I want that specific item to be my version of HarperCollins. Same idea for departments and sections. You may want to go in and say, well, no, we don't call it cooking, we call it cooking and nutrition. The other area that you're most likely to run into vendors is probably on a purchase order, either having selected a vendor to send the purchase order to, or if you're working inside a purchase order and you happen to notice that maybe the pub column is not filled out. None of these records right now have a publisher. It could have been just something I didn't get put into my system early on when I was building the inventory, easily fixed. If I am on one of these items and I want to correct or change the publisher, I can do a right click on the item in the purchase order details tab, and I can choose either to go to master file, which would take me to the Fallout inventory screen, great if there's a lot of things I want to change, or I could choose this much quicker little edit inventory, which just brings up a small window so I can make just those quick 1 or 2 little changes. So I can fix the author's name, I could assign the section, but more importantly, I want to go in and put in my vendor. Now this one, we'll put this one under perhaps the HarperCollins one we were working with a moment ago, and I'm not quite sure the spelling, or I just want to be quick, so I'll just type in the first couple of letters, hit enter, and if it doesn't have an exact match, it brings up this little floating vendor assistant window. So it sorted everything by the name field, or I could have left it another time to say sort by code, but we'll leave it to sort by name. It sorted by name, and it found the first thing that matched that HAR that I put in. From there, I can arrow down, I can use my mouse to click on an item in a grid. Once I've got the item, I can either do F12 select, or I can just double click on it. Now we're back to that middle floating edit inventory window where I've fixed my publisher. I can maybe also correct my distributor. Maybe I'll normally go to one of the Ingram vendors to order that title, and then F12 save. So I've now fixed that particular title. I can do that same idea, right click, edit inventory, either type in the first letter or 2, or just select the vendor assistant button. That's what all these little 3 dot buttons are, and that too will also bring up the vendor assistant. I can create a vendor on the fly as well. Maybe I find the one I wanted is not here. I'll say F4 new, and again put in the name, make sure the shortcode is good the way you want it, F10 save, and there again I'm right back to my edit inventory window with that brand new vendor that I've just created, and then F12 save. There are some other tools when it comes to vendors, some other little tricks. One quick little good suggestion is if you want to clean up your inventory and you have done a little bit of looking and you find that, let's say, anything that starts with, say, 630, we know it is such and such a publisher. Well, what we can do is we could actually go through the inventory and say search by ISBN, but search only by those first few numbers. There is a code list out there. Just Google it. You'll be able to find what publishers have been assigned what starting numbers of their ISBN. So by saying I want to search just by that first few numbers, here's everything that meets that. And then just by looking at the screen, my familiarity with the titles that I'm looking at, the section they're in, I could go in and do that same shift left click on the first one, shift left click on the last one I want. I can use control click to pick and choose other titles in that same list. And then once I have all the ones selected that I may want to modify, I can right click and say reassign and fix that publisher to whoever it really needs to be. Ideally, if you are importing from a system, you will take the few moments to make those corrections on this screen while you're in the import external data. That's because the more work you do in there, you're training the program, you're telling it to learn your associations. That's actually an area of the program where you could go in and say, we want to find out what value had come in and what did we actually set it to. So here's a good example. An item came in that had the code of fiction and fantasy from whatever source I got it from. But when we added that inventory item, we said it was architecture. That's probably not correct, so I can go in and I can say we want to change this to maybe science fiction or fantasy, so that the next time I import an inventory item in who is set with this as a section or whatever else as the publisher, I get that chance to correct it. That's about it for vendor records. There's lots more information out there. Don't forget you can go to the help menu and do help on the web to bring up the most up-to-date help system account. Or you can also go to the YouTube channels that we started off from and also the Anthology website.